Okay, so the next topic I thought we should talk about today, Jen, is a little bit of some shifting feelings, vibes happening in the generative AI landscape, and what, if anything, we think those shifting feelings mean for legal. And there are a bunch of different examples of this. OpenAI, I feel like, has had a rough few weeks in the media, and I shouldn't say in the media. They've had a rough few weeks with a few different issues happening, including some pretty aggressive employment contracts, this dust up with Scarlett Johansson, which people probably read about, although they might not understand the details, and then the departure of two of the leaders of their super alignment team. And maybe we should pause briefly, and you could explain, first of all, who OpenAI is and what their super alignment team is, and then talk a little bit about whether you think these setbacks for OpenAI have any impact on the broader issues we're talking about.
Sure. So OpenAI is the company behind ChatGPT. So OpenAI is essentially a startup that's about 8 years old, was founded by people whose names you might recognize, like Elon Musk, Sam Altman, you might be reading about in the news. There are also some other founders like John Schulman, we'll talk about in a minute, and Ilya Sutskever, who you may not be familiar with, but were essential to the creation of OpenAI. And we could spend many podcasts talking about the origin stories. I would just recommend we use this for our class if you're curious about the background, to read Genius Makers by New York Times columnist Cade Metz, which is a really great history of artificial intelligence. But a lot has happened at OpenAI since the release of ChatGPT, and it seems as though there's a little bit of an identity crisis happening that appears to be a combination of a desire to accelerate the technology, to continue winning the arms race around generative AI in Silicon Valley against other giants like Google, Meta, and some of that acceleration appears to be coming at the cost of the publicly stated goals of being ethical and responsible in the deployment of the technology. And as you mentioned, Bridget, a few things have happened in the last 6 weeks or so. One is that news emerged that there have been several high-profile departures from OpenAI in the last year or so. And we've just learned that OpenAI has extremely rare contract provisions that involve the relinquishment of vested stock rights if a former employee is to disparage OpenAI publicly or comment in ways that damage the reputation of the company, and even include, I believe, a clause that prohibits those former employees from even recognizing that this agreement exists. So there's been some conversation about why OpenAI wants to control so much of the speech of its former employees. And just to put some context around it, I mean, they would be risking millions of dollars in vested stock options. So it's a pretty substantial amount of leverage to apply to their former employees. As you mentioned, most people are probably familiar with the Scarlett Johansson story, but Scarlett Johansson, of course, voiced the character of Samantha in the movie Her, which was about artificial intelligence. Sam Altman, the president of OpenAI, really, really wanted her to be the initial voice, apparently, for his voice version of ChatGPT, asked her 2 times, and she said no 2 times. And nonetheless, when ChatGPT 4.0, which is the most recent version, came out a few weeks ago, it sounded eerily like Scarlett Johansson. And then Sam Altman did nothing to dissuade the public from thinking it was her by tweeting out just the word her, referencing the movie that she was in. So through her legal team, she has achieved the yanking of that voice from the platform. But that was just another sort of signal to me, at least, that the OpenAI leadership are willing to do whatever they want to get what they want, which is sort of in the DNA of Silicon Valley, but creates some alarm. And then the last piece that you mentioned is the dismantling of the super alignment team. And super alignment is the concept that as the artificial intelligence becomes more and more capable, of doing things on its own, which is a concept called agentism, where AI can do activities that you didn't necessarily prompt it to do in furtherance of the initial prompt, that super alignment teams would be sitting above that activity, ensuring that the actions of the artificial intelligence don't become dangerous or harmful to humanity. So the initial vision, as I understood it, was there would be this super alignment team that would help protect all of us as the artificial intelligence gets more and more sophisticated. And now the members of that team, Ilya Sutskever and Jan Leike and others, have departed OpenAI, which raises some questions about the safety of future AI development. Anything that I'm missing there, Bridget, that you would add?
No, I think you covered it. The OpenAI did announce that it had put together sort of a new safety team, and Sam Altman himself, I think, is on that team or maybe leads that team. I'm not sure. I followed all of the personnel exactly. But they did want to, I think, signal that they are still focused on safety, even with the departures, I should say, of the former leaders of that team. And one of their founders, John Schulman, was recently interviewed on another podcast, and he, I think, is now leading the super alignment team. And it sounds like he is quite candid about the fact that there is a lot that nobody exactly understands about the risks of artificial general intelligence kind of happening before we're all ready for it. And by we're all, I mean that they're all, because I don't work in one of these labs. But it was a pretty interesting interview that kind of aligns with some others that I've heard of leaders of other frontier model companies. And I wonder if you had any thoughts on that, or you want to talk a little bit more about that for a minute. I think this is why the stories are having the impact they are, is the fear and risks of what it might mean if the frontier model companies don't have a handle on when artificial general intelligence happens.
And, you mentioned the other companies, and Google has also come under fire in recent weeks for two different reasons, really. One is the implications of Google using generative AI to produce search results that bypass the way that we're used to using Google, with hyperlinks that go to websites, including major media sites, has enormous implications for the media industry and its revenue model, which is highly dependent on Google search results. And Sundar Pichai, who is the CEO of Alphabet, the parent company of Google, has, from what I'm reading in the commentary, not satisfied the community of people who rely on search traffic from Google as to what the future of the industry looks like in a world with generative summaries that just take information from their sites without driving traffic to them. And we talk in legal about how existential the sort of implications are for different business models in our industry. But in the media industry, it's an existential question as to what a change in Google's approach to search will be for a whole host of organizations, which has society-wide implications for the way media covers events and how well reporters and journalists are funded. So, I think people have been disappointed at the responses coming from Google. The other piece on Google's front is they do have these generative summaries now. If you type into Google, you'll get a little paragraph at the top that offers a summary response to your question. And a lot of these summaries are inaccurate, misleading, and have been sort of criticized as a result. And what it means to me is I'm sort of getting used to this idea that, again, this is a very different type of technology than we're used to. When these companies generally release products to the public, they are so well designed, so finely tuned, that a minor error creates a maelstrom of conversation about what were they thinking when they released this. But here we're seeing this sort of not fully baked release of many different products to the public. And it's a weird thing to get used to, I think, as a consumer or member of the public. And it raises questions about how responsible the deployment of the technology is and how helpful this sort of arms race will be in the long run. So I've been trying to grapple with what that means for us as a society. If we're just constantly tumbling toward the next innovation, what does that mean for everybody else that might get crushed in the wake or is unprepared for a flawed technology?
Outside of legal, I think there's, well, not in every field, but in many fields there is I think a higher comfort level with imperfection. When Google tells you, and this is an example that a lot of people were talking about, that one way to keep your cheese on your pizza is to use glue. People can think that's funny, but the risks in the legal profession are, at least lawyers think, more significant if you get bad information from one of these models. I think lawyers see these mistakes, and it's a reason why we just shut down in thinking about the ways in which they're going to impact the future of our profession, whether we like it or not. So I don't know. That's something that I spend a little bit of time thinking about. I think I sort of skipped over AGI in my previous question to you, Jen, and I don't know. Do you want to explain what AGI means? And I think that one of the things I struggle with is it's not clear it means the same thing to everybody, and not even to the folks that are working on achieving it.
Yeah, so my understanding of AGI is artificial general intelligence. And as I understand it, AGI will be reached when artificial intelligence is capable of performing most tasks at a level that is equal to or superior to human capability. And I think, as we were referencing throughout, one of the weird things about this technology is the technologists in the world who are developing it, who are the top technologists ever globally, don't fully understand how this technology works. And based on all the interviews I've heard, don't have a working definition for when we will know when we've reached AGI and what the implications will be and what we will do as a result. But the timelines are something to pay attention to, because it sounds like science fiction. It sounds like something that's 50 years away, but most of these technologists are estimating something between 2 and 8 years until we reach whatever they determine to be artificial general intelligence.
Yeah, I found it really striking that John Schulman, the one of the OpenAI founders, who now I believe is the head of their security team or safety team, I guess is what they call it, super alignment team, thinks it's, just a few years away. And he readily admits, I think admirably admits, that there really isn't a plan across all of the technologists working to achieve it about what will happen when one of them gets there. And in fact, game theory suggests that there will just be a continuing race towards AGI from the rest of them. And unless we can figure out a way to have all of the technologists working on these models working together on safety, at least, it's a big unknown. And I feel like now we've headed into the riskier, scarier parts of parts of this technology, and that wasn't what this podcast was supposed to be about, because there are lots of things to be excited about. But I guess in addition to the the news about safety and security and AGI, which does seem significant. We should say that. We should acknowledge that. There's also some recent news about error rates in the large language models that are built specifically for legal uses. Stanford has a group of technologists and lawyers. I think they're the researchers are lawyers as well, who just released a study saying that the AI tools built for legal use cases also still show errors, that they are not error-free. And so to the extent those products are advertised as a safe way for lawyers to use them, lawyers need to know that you can't just turn over your legal work to one of these technologies. I don't actually have my understanding of the Stanford work is pretty elementary at this point, but I will keep reading about it and we can keep talking about it as we go. I don't know if you had any reactions to that news, Jen.
Well, I think I want to put a fine point on the point you're making about the marketing, which seems to me to be the more troubling part of. I also have not taken a deep dive into the methodology behind the Stanford studies, but I have seen all of the promos and ad campaigns that tout hallucination-free results. And I think, to your point, to turning back to a positive framing of the possibility of AI, one of the biggest challenges in the legal profession is our baked-in skepticism as lawyers, and our focus on issues, which we need to be highly attuned to as counselors. But I think it's not helpful in the conversation where we will be more likely to skew into the skeptical camp generally, and then to make claims that are not possible at this point with the technology, I think only adds fuel to the fire of the conversation around, this is not a technology that is safe to use, the sort of constant focus on the hallucinations, which will be important to solve. But I think, you and I have talked about this focus on the error rates and the flaws sort of doesn't give enough light to the enormous capacity it already has and how amazing the technology already is, and the fact that this will be the worst version of this technology we ever see. And so I think my issue really is with the way that the incumbent companies are framing the success rates. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think I absolutely agree with that. I understand the market pressure to, tell consumers that you've solved the one problem, legal consumers in particular, that they are most worried about. But ever since lawyers started practicing law, we have worked with colleagues, associates, clerks, law clerks, and they aren't perfect, right? Like, mistakes happen. And one of the things that, lawyers learn to do is carefully review and spot them. So I do think if we talked about the products a little differently, this wouldn't be as big of an issue.